All right, so good morning again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another virtual breakfast. It's starting to get a little bit cool when we wake up in the morning, and so I think fall may be creeping in here, but definitely harvest is underway, so it's very exciting. I hear sugar beets being dug, and dry beans will soon be next, some of the earlier classes. So we are underway here with harvest time. And today we're going to be talking about some nematodes. So my name is Monica Jean. I'm a field crops educator based in the Bay region. And with that, we'll stop sharing so Marisol can.
Okay, looks good. So, good morning, everyone. I see quite a few people. Always a pleasure to talk to all the growers and extension people in the call. So, and agricultural professionals, obviously, also. So today we're going to talk about nematodes mainly in field crops. So you can see this picture here. This picture was done by my student, Elizabeth Darling. Those are root lesion nematodes migrating inside a root, and you can see they're feeding and damaging root cells. So just for art. All right. So we're going to talk mainly about nematodes in crops and problems and some solutions. So we're going to start with potato. In most of my talks, I focus mainly on soybeans as nematodes, which we will, but I'm going to start with potato today in order to switch things up. Potato has a problem related with nematodes called potato early die. It's a combination of Verticillium dahlia, which is a fungi, and root lesion nematode, Pretolinchus penetrans. And you can see in the screen, close to the end of the season, potato early die affects the potato plant, and it wilts, and you can see some vascular discoloration. So like I said, it's a combination of Pretolinchus penetrans and Verticillium dahlia. So Pretolinchus penetrans is a nematodes. I am aware that some of you might not be looking at the pictures and might be using your phone, so I'm going to try to describe things. So nematodes are worms, and Verticillium dahlia is a fungi, and they work together, and they affect potatoes. So we did trials with compost, and we found that a couple kinds of compost and layer ash blend, both had significant effects in reducing the effect, and mainly root lesion nematode. So you can see in the first graph that even at a 5% concentration, in other words, 95% sand and 5% compost, manure compost, you in the layer ash blend, we had 100% mortality of nematodes. Even a 5% compost in your field would be a very, very high rate. So we compared rates that are more realistic, things like 1.25 tons, 2 tons per acre. And at those rates, we still saw a significant percentage of control, 40% control or 16% control, even under those low rates when we tried it in the lab. So there again, you can see that things like layer ash blend and poultry manure and layer ash blend were among the most effective. The dairy compost, even though it has a lot of beneficial aspects in the soil, it's not the best for controlling nematodes. So, and this graph mainly shows that the system that had the lowest nematode numbers also had the highest yields. And also, these systems had an effect on vascular discoloration in potatoes. Okay, so, all right. So now we're going to talk about different crops, soybeans, sugar beets, and a few other crops. In the bottom, you can see pictures of soybean cyst nematode or beet cyst nematode, and they produce cysts. In the middle, there's a cyst full of eggs. So a cyst looks like kind of like a lemon, and the female will die full of eggs, and 200 eggs, 150 eggs, and those cysts are set for the long haul. So even if you don't plant their ideal crop for years, even 10 years, they still can hatch and affect your crop. But there's mortality every year. So if you rotate with non-host, you do get a decrease in number, a decrease of these cyst nematodes. So we're first going to talk about soybean cyst nematode. We did a 4-year rotation of different sources of resistance, and this has been published in the journal Crop Protection. It was an important publication for us. We rotated different sources of resistance, one Peking, another one P188788, and susceptible. P188788 is the most common source of resistance. It has been used for more than 20 years. It is so commonly used that it's difficult for you to find soybeans that don't have this source of resistance. Peking is the second most common source of resistance for soybean cyst nematode. And susceptible is soybeans that don't have any resistance to soybean cyst nematode. So the way that I abbreviate it here is 8DV means P188788 derived variety, PDV is Peking derived variety, and susceptible is just S. So we did this for 4 years in a randomized block design and replicated with 4 replications, and it was either, P188788 and P188788 back to back, or Peking back to back, or combinations of rotations, like P188788 and Peking, rotated, switched every year, or susceptible in between, etc. So here you can see the results. So to simplify things, the yellow bar is I need to move these bars right there. So the yellow bar is the P188788 with Peking rotated, switched around. So you can see in 2018, soybean cyst nematode was in the lowest numbers when we rotated P188788 with Peking. And also it was the lowest numbers of nematodes in 2020. So, and this was consistent in 2019. It was such a wet year that I think nematodes in general, in all my trials, not only soybeans, in all my trials, the numbers tended to be low. Nematodes tend to struggle in very wet years or in very wet areas. So you can see that rotating Peking with P188788 had the biggest control, the largest, and it was significant, the largest impact on decreasing nematode numbers. When you had either Peking or P188788 back to back, the numbers of nematodes were higher. Also, you can see that the yellow bar tended to have the highest yield in most years. And the years where it wasn't significantly different from the other 3. In general, whichever year had a susceptible tended to be lower. Also, if you rotate Peking back to back, so just consistent Peking, it does not lead to a yield increase. Okay, or it would be better to just plant the P188788 back to back. That's all you decide to do. that's a better decision than just Peking back to back. Peking is an excellent resource, but it should be rotated with P188788. Okay, so here you can see this correlation, and in this correlation, it shows that numbers of nematodes is negatively correlated with yield. So the higher the number of nematodes, the lower your yield. So that, and it is significant. It's the p-value to less than 0.001. So therefore, we are sure that soybeans as nematode is reducing your yield. Okay, we have tested different selected cover crops and blends, and we can see, you can see here the different options that we use. We found that most cover crops, most oilseed radish are just not a host of soybeans as nematode. So mainly they're acting as a non-host, not as any kind of trap crop. We are evaluating an SCN trap crop. Sita, my postdoc, has evaluated this, and she has found that it's a lot like planting fallow. She's not finding that it's acting much like a trap crop in the sense that promoting hatching, but she's not done with that. But so far, it's not reducing nematodes beyond just non-host. So here is Sita with Emily in the field, planting the field trial. So for cover crops, this is the way we evaluate cover crops. So you can see a picture here with these little containers. They're called containers, and we inoculate those containers with nematodes, and then we plant cover crops in those containers. And after 8 weeks, we extract to see if the nematode increase, through reproduction, or if the numbers are the same or reduced. And that way we can see if the cover crop can helps us to reduce nematodes. So here you can see an example of northern root knot nematode, and you can see those knots in the roots, those like looking galls or knots in the roots. Those are actually caused by northern root knot nematode. You can see in tomato also that the roots are knotty, they have galls. So that's how it looks when northern root knot nematode affects the plants. So here's a graph of our trial with different cover crops. So generally, northern root knot nematode is not a big problem in field crops, except in maybe some muck areas. I've seen some problem with soybean, but not very much. But it can be a big problem in vegetables that are grown in muck areas, in muck soil, or extremely sandy soil where you are not rotating very often. But in Michigan, I've noticed the problem mainly in muck area, and also in ornamentals. In ornamentals, even in sandy areas, northern root knot nematode can be a problem. But just you can see here that carrot, celery, and tomato, all excellent hosts of northern root knot nematode. Most cover crops that we tested were excellent to reduce northern root knot nematode. The most effective one, of course, were the grasses, because northern root knot nematode cannot reproduce at all in any grass. Sorghum Sudan grass, we had 0 reproduction. And there's certain oilseed radishes, variety named Control, which Control is not like an experimental control, but the variety is called Control. So Control, Concord were almost close to 0. Excellent choices for northern root knot nematode. So Control, Concord, and Select, both excellent, and all the grasses. For root lesion nematode, we obviously carrot is an excellent host for root lesion nematode. Most of our favorite crops are good hosts of root lesion nematode. Carrots, soybeans, many fruit trees, and sugar beet. It's root lesion nematode really can feed on a lot of crops. But in this case, we tested carrot and several cover crops for comparison. You can see that these oilseed radish variety control, and this is variety control, but a little bit different variety, a spin-off of that variety, Control ASC, and Concord had the lowest reproduction of root lesion nematode. So the variety that was the most effective for root knot, it seems to be also the most effective for root lesion, which is a good news. Dwarf's FX race and Select also was very effective for root knot, but also very effective for root lesion nematode. We find that the tillage radish, that it's many times used for breaking the ground, it's a good host for root lesion. It's also a great host for northern root knot, and it's a great host for sugar beet cyst nematode, by the way. So tillage radish, if your main objective is to control nematodes, tillage radish would not be the best option. Neither are any of the similar ones like Respect, Nitro, Image, Enricher, Ecotil. Those are all different versions of the tillage radish, and they're all pretty good hosts for root lesion nematode. They can be a host for sugar beet cyst nematode, and root knot nematode. But the oilseed radish, radish control, Concord, Select, those are good options. So poor host, you can see there some good options if you do have problem with root lesion nematode. So for cover crops, so one of the main things that if you're going to use cover crops is know which nematodes you have. So know your numbers, submit a sample to the plant diagnostic lab. And by the way, this goes for all the crops you're growing. If you're growing soybeans, the Michigan Soybean Committee, and now it's called the Michigan Soybean Committee, covers the cost of your sample with the checkoff dollars. You can submit it to the MSU Plant Diagnostic Lab. There's a special form that you need to use for soybean cyst nematode that you can find in the MSU website. For sugar beets, you can also submit the sample to the Plant Diagnostic Lab for any crop that you are doing. The best time to take a sample is in the fall when you're about to harvest your crop. That way, the nematodes would be the highest. So if you're planting soybeans, around this time, soybean cyst nematode would be the highest, highest levels, around this time until harvest. You'll have high numbers, and you'll be able to make good decisions on management practices for next time you plant soybeans in that field. Sugar beet cyst nematode, same. The best time to take sugar beet cyst nematode samples is at harvest, and take samples in areas close to the roots because the nematodes are associated with the roots. So you want to get close to the roots in your samples. So poor host for northern root knot nematode, you can see in the brassicas, oilseed radish, variety control, Concord, Ecotil, Select, Nitro, Dwarf, Essex, right? For grasses, just any grass works. Corn, wheat, anything works for northern root knot nematode. But Sudan grass, oats, and wheat are the ones we tested, and they're totally non-host. For root lesion nematode, oilseed radish control, Concord, Select, and Defender were the best at reducing root lesion nematode numbers, and Dwarf Essex rate. Now for beet cyst nematode. For beet cyst nematode, we have done many nematicide trials. Most of them have not performed excellent. In part, it's difficult to do trials in nematodes in the field because the numbers are so variable that it's difficult to get significant difference. But this is one that we did get significant difference with abamectin. We got a greater yield. Yes.
So we are getting over on our time, actually.
Oh boy.
Yep. So if you could
I'm gonna go. So we tested cover crops for seed cyst nematode. You can see for beet cyst nematode, also Control, Concord, Defender, Ecotil, Nitro, and Select were all excellent to reduce beet cyst nematode numbers. For beet cyst nematode, the best way is sampling, to control sampling, use tolerant varieties, rotate with non-host, There are some cover crops, oilseed radish, that are excellent traps of BCN, Bcis nematode. I'm going to skip some things. So I want to acknowledge all the grants and all the Michigan Soybean Committee for providing funding, Project Green, NDART, USDA NIFA. I've gotten a couple grants there. Michigan Sugar Potatoes, Michigan Corn Marketing Committee, Michigan Vegetable Council, etc., and so many other collaborators that have made my work possible. And thank you very much.
I just wanted to mention quickly that besides obviously having this live, because you're on here, we also have this presentation. It's been put onto Facebook, and it also is available through our podcast, which is on Spotify and iTunes. Besides the virtual breakfast recordings, we do have other recordings, informational recordings on there that you can listen to as well. So if you like listening to podcasts in the cab while you're harvesting, go ahead and take a look at those. And then Jeff, is that the last one? All right. Yeah. Questions and answers. So if you want to stop sharing, Jeff, then we can see everybody. Thank you. So, hoping there's some other specialists on today. I do want to mention that right after this, our team is meeting. So a lot of us are on our way here to Mount Pleasant, where I'm located, for a team retreat. But we will do the best we can to answer the questions that come in with a couple of people that are on from the team. So Marisol, I did see you answered the question, but there was a question in there about, well, first you put your email. So if people want to see the remainder of Marisol's presentations or want to have a conversation with her, she did include her email, marisol@msu.edu. But there was one specific question about the use of a sorghum Sudan grass cover crop and its impact, I'm assuming, on nematode populations. Did you have...
Yeah, well, they asked what is sorghum, and sorghum is a grass. It's a summer grass. It grows very well in warm weather, it's a non-host for northern root knot. Just any grass is non-host for northern root knot, including corn. It's just northern root knot does not reproduce on grasses. So, but it is also a pretty good option for root lesion nematode. It is a good option for several nematodes. In the ornamentals, in daylilies, when they start using sorghum Sudan grass instead of like tillage radish, it really reduced their northern root knot nematode numbers. So if you do have the northern root knot nematode, it's a good option. It's just another cover crop option, Monica.
Okay, and someone did ask what makes grasses not a good host for northern root knot nematodes.
Okay, well, so different nematodes will have different host ranges, things they can feed on and things they cannot. There is several types of root knot nematodes, like the southern root knot nematode can feed like on corn, it's a grass, but the northern root knot nematode cannot. So the northern root knot nematode cannot feed on any grasses. It can feed on so many things, potatoes and soybeans and vegetables like carrots, and can feed on daylilies and all kinds of things. But grasses, it can't. Why it can't? It's just this biology. So certain nematodes, like especially root knot nematodes and cis nematodes, they communicate with the plant. They put like a chemical, when they go inside the root, they put out a chemical message to the plant, and the plant makes it a home, a specialized cells to feed the nematode. And the plants have kind of adapted that message to certain plants. So it's just not adapted to these grasses. It can't reproduce in it. It can't produce those special cells, those special cells that feed the nematode so it can become sedentary. It's just not, they're just not host.
Okay. We did have another question, and I'm not sure, Marisol, if you know the answer to this. It seemed like a broader team question to me, but someone submitted that they have a field of soybeans starting to turn color. However, directly over the tiles they are still lush green. And so that farmer can tell where the tiles are located. Can someone explain why this is happening? And I already looked, and neither Manny nor Mike Staten are on. So do you have any explanation for that, Phil?
Monica, I think there's several things that could be going on there. During this growing season, it's been dry enough. I don't think it's probably going to be a disease issue. So it could be just an oxygen.
Yeah, I was thinking like
type of effect.
Yeah.
It's hard to say without looking. It depends on a lot of things, and I don't know that I could tell just by having you describe that. Sorry.
It's okay. I was thinking it's obviously resource allocation in those areas. So if they're doing well through the drought season, or nitrogen, and well, nitrogen's not as much important for soybeans, but our nutrients tend to be closely tied to water availability as well. And so just like resource allocation in those areas is my assumption, but neither one of the people who I would say could best answer that are on. I don't know if Jeff, I saw you turned your, did you have anything to add?
I would agree with it's a resource allocation. That would be at least for me would be the lead, at least theory, but without seeing and looking more closely, it's difficult to know. It could be a number of things, but there's obviously just something different physically with the moisture. And we have had in many parts of the state, we have had an abnormally dry year. Again, it just depends on where the location is, but some spots have been too dry.
Yeah. Okay. There was another question here. Do the different poultry composts have the same effect on soybean cyst nematodes as root knot nematodes?
Okay, so most of the compost trials that I mentioned, I have done them in root lesion nematode. I've also done in soybean cyst nematode, and we have found that poultry manure compost and also layer ash blend, which is Morgan composting, both of them, they reduce numbers of nematodes. Do they have an effect on soybean cyst nematode? And the answer is yes. When we have added these, we have tested poultry, not necessarily compost, just raw, since most of these soybeans are used for animal consumption. The food safety regulations are not as strict, so you can just apply poultry manure, and we have found that it decreases soybean cyst nematode numbers. We apply this poultry manure in the year of corn. So because corn benefits from the manure because it needs nitrogen, etc. So it's a nutrient source for corn, and what we're finding is that it's reducing the numbers, but also causing them to hatch. So we'll have an increase of juveniles, and that means that they're hatching. And hatching for soybean cyst nematode to hatch when there's corn is a suicide mission because there's no soybeans to feed on. So that actually leads to a decrease. So that effect, we have seen that. It is not very impactful. I mean, the decrease will be like a 10% or something like that. And many times we have found significance, but barely, barely 0.5. And some of them we have found that it's 90%, the significant up to the 90% level and not the desired 95%. So I wouldn't say that if you apply poultry manure, you're going to get rid of soybean cyst nematode, but you're going to help to reduce them some. So managing soybean cyst nematode is a multi-step process. You need to use resistant varieties, hopefully rotate sources of resistance, rotate with non-hosts such as corn or wheat or any non-host. And manure is an option that also can help. You know, in the year of corn, you can add manure and it helps to reduce those numbers further. Taking samples to know what you have in order to know what to do, of course, is important. And if you don't have it, you can try to prevent by getting it by, washing your machinery before going into a clean field. So, but manure is just one more tool, it's not the solution because it doesn't eliminate it, but it does help to reduce. Yeah.
All right, fabulous. Thank you. Is there any other specialists on? I know school started too, so we've got double whammies today. Is there any other specialists on that would like to share any updates from the fields? All right. Well, with that, I would like to thank everyone for another successful virtual breakfast, including Marisol and Jeff giving their presentations. It's very appreciated. And please remember to join us next week for the Mike Staten talking about preventing soybean harvest loss. So have a wonderful week.